Adrian, are you listening to me? This deal will restructure the entire Asian market for us. The voice of his CFO faded into background noise as Adrian Blackwood noticed something was wrong across the table. The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Club cast a golden glow over the faces of New York's business elite, but one face had suddenly lost all color. Sophia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The sound cut through the murmur of conversation like a gunshot. Her body swayed, eyes rolling back as she gripped the edge of the table. Sophia? Adrian was on his feet before he realized he'd moved. She tried to speak, her lips forming words without sound. Then her knees buckled. Adrian lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. The weight of her in his arms felt impossibly light. Her skin burned against his palms. "Call an ambulance," he commanded, his voice slicing through the shocked silence. The Japanese investors stared. The board members froze mid-conversation. None of that mattered. For the first time in his life, Adrian Blackwood, the man who'd built a tech empire valued at $4.2 billion, felt utterly powerless. "Stay with me," he whispered, brushing dark hair from her forehead. "Please, Sophia, stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered, revealing a flash of recognition before closing again. Blood stained the corner of her lips. And in that moment, watching his contractual wife fighting for consciousness in his arms, Adrian realized with absolute clarity, this was never just business. Have you ever wondered what happens when a business arrangement turns into something much more complicated and much more real? For Adrian Blackwood, life had always been a series of calculated risks and measurable returns. His marriage to Sophia Chen was supposed to be simple, a 3-year contract, separate lives, mutual benefits. She would get the research funding she desperately needed. He would satisfy his grandfather's antiquated will stipulation and maintain control of his empire. But as the ambulance sirens wailed through Manhattan's streets that night, as medical personnel rushed his unconscious wife through hospital doors, Adrian realized he'd miscalculated spectacularly. Some equations can't be solved with logic. Some contracts bind more than signatures. Some secrets change everything. What Adrian Blackwood was about to discover would change everything he thought he knew about love, success, and what truly matters in life. This brilliant, driven man had conquered markets, outmaneuvered rivals, and built a technological dynasty from nothing. Yet he'd never faced a challenge like Sophia Chen, the woman who agreed to be his wife on paper but vowed to keep her heart off limits. Her collapse at the Metropolitan Club wasn't just a medical emergency. It was the moment the carefully constructed walls between them began to crumble, revealing truths neither was prepared to face. How could a man who calculated everything to the last decimal point fail to see the most important variable of all? The answer lies in a story about second chances and hidden strengths, about finding value in unexpected places, about the courage to be vulnerable when vulnerability feels like surrender. As Adrian paced the sterile hospital corridor waiting for news about Sophia's condition, one question consumed him. How could he have lived alongside this woman for months without seeing what was happening? The signs had been there, the missed meals, the fatigue, the moments she thought he wasn't looking. But he'd been too focused on the bottom line to notice the human being behind their contract. What he would learn in the coming hours would force him to reconsider everything, including whether some commitments transcend the papers they're written on. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Mr. Ross' Story Trail. For our new viewers joining us today, you're in for a powerful journey of transformation. Before we dive deeper into Adrian and Sophia's story, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss our next adventure in storytelling. Today's tale explores how life's most meaningful connections often arrive disguised as something else entirely. It's about seeing beyond facades and finding extraordinary courage in ordinary moments. This isn't just another billionaire romance. It's about two brilliant minds colliding in circumstances neither could have predicted, and the remarkable things that happen when business ends and humanity begins. Now let's rewind to understand how Adrian Blackwood, New York's most eligible bachelor and ruthless business titan, found himself in a marriage of convenience that would become the most inconvenient thing of all, a chance at real love. Adrian Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, 62 stories above Manhattan. The city sprawled before him like a circuit board of lights and movement, each building a component, each street a connection, all part of a system he'd learned to navigate and control. "The Clarkson Group is prepared to accept our offer," said his CFO, sliding a folder across the polished obsidian desk. "Their board votes tomorrow." Adrian nodded without turning. Another acquisition, Another billion added to Blackwood Innovations' valuation. Another victory that should feel significant but somehow didn't. He checked his watch, a rare Patek Philippe that cost more than most people's homes. Cancel my dinner with the venture capital group. Tell them something came up, but you've been pursuing their investment for months. They'll wait, Adrian said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. They know our projections. When the CFO left, Adrian loosened his Italian silk tie and poured himself 3 fingers of 30-year-old Macallan. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it, contemplating the empire he'd built before his 32nd birthday. His reflection in the window looked back at him, impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit, precision-cut dark hair, features that magazines described as aristocratic despite his middle-class origins. The face of success. So why did success feel so hollow? The penthouse that sprawled around him, 9,000 square feet of architectural perfection, echoed with emptiness. Modern art worth millions adorned walls that had never heard laughter. The professional kitchen had never known the chaos of a family dinner. The guest rooms remained pristine, unused. Adrian drained his scotch, feeling the familiar burn. Even that sensation had become predictable. "Mr. Blackwood, your car is waiting," announced his assistant through the intercom. "And your grandmother called again. She said it's urgent." Adrian sighed. Eleanor Blackwood was the only person alive who could make him feel like an errant schoolboy rather than one of the most powerful men in New York. His phone buzzed with her text message. 4 months left, Adrian. You can't outrun this forever. She was right, of course. Eleanor always was. 4 months until the deadline in his grandfather's will. Marry by his 33rd birthday or lose controlling interest in Blackwood Innovations to the board of directors. An antiquated stipulation from a man who believed family values stabilized business leadership. Absurd in the modern world, but legally binding thanks to the ironclad documents his grandfather had created. For years, Adrian had ignored the marriage clause, building his company with single-minded focus. But now, with the deadline approaching, the board was getting restless, anticipating the power shift that would come if he remained unmarried. He'd founded Blackwood Innovations in a garage 10 years ago with nothing but student loans and determination. The company had revolutionized quantum computing, making the impossible possible. He'd outworked, outsmarted, and outmaneuvered everyone who said he would fail. Now it could all slip away because of an outdated moral clause. The New York Times had named Adrian the architect of the future in their cover profile last year. Forbes listed him among the youngest self-made billionaires in America. His technological innovations had changed industries and saved lives, yet his personal connections remained superficial, strategic associations with people who wanted something from him, or whom he needed something from. Women came and went, attracted to his wealth and power, never seeing beyond the carefully constructed facade he presented. He preferred it that way. Emotional entanglements were inefficient. Relationships required time he didn't have, vulnerability he couldn't afford. The truth that Adrian never admitted aloud, he didn't know how to connect. Not really. Not since his parents' deaths when he was 19, the car accident that left him alone except for his grandmother Eleanor. After the funeral, he'd channeled his grief into work, building walls around himself brick by brick until they became so familiar he no longer noticed their presence. Now, at the pinnacle of success, those walls isolated him completely. He had everything and nothing simultaneously. His assistant knocked, then entered with a stack of files. "These need signatures before tomorrow's board meeting. And Miss Reynolds called to confirm your attendance at the Metropolitan Museum Gala next weekend." Adrian nodded absently, taking the files. "Who is Miss Reynolds again?" "Your date for the past 3 charity events," his assistant replied, not bothering to hide her exasperation. "The supermodel?" Right. He couldn't recall the woman's face. That evening, Eleanor Blackwood sat across from her grandson in his rarely used dining room, her posture as straight as it had been in her dancing days. At 78, she remained formidable, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "You're running out of time, Adrian," she said, cutting precisely into her steak. Gerald's will was clear. Adrian swirled his wine. "The clause is archaic, grandmother. We could challenge it. And spend years in litigation while your board takes control? Is that what you want for the company you built?" Eleanor set down her fork. "Your grandfather believed that family grounded a man, gave him perspective beyond quarterly reports. Grandfather came from a different era. Perhaps Eleanor studied him, but his insight about you was correct. Look at yourself, Adrian. When was the last time you felt truly alive? Not successful, alive." The question lingered uncomfortably. Adrian couldn't answer. "The company is my life," he finally said. "That's precisely the problem." Eleanor's voice softened. "You've built something remarkable, but what's it all for if there's no one to share it with?" Later, alone again, Adrian pulled up the marriage clause on his tablet. The wording was unambiguous. Without marriage, his voting shares would be redistributed among board members, leaving him a wealthy man but no longer in control of his creation. He poured another scotch and approached the problem like he did all challenges, analytically. If marriage was required, he would find a solution. A contract, terms, boundaries, a business arrangement with mutual benefits and minimal complications. Sentiment had no place in his decision. This would be a strategic merger, nothing more. The wedding ceremony took place at Eleanor Blackwood's estate in the Hamptons, small but exquisite, with only 30 carefully selected guests, board members, key investors, and a handful of society figures whose absence would have sparked unwanted questions. Sophia wore an understated Vera Wang gown, elegantly simple. Adrian had arranged everything through his team of event planners, approaching the ceremony like any other corporate function requiring precise execution. "You look beautiful," Eleanor told Sophia as they waited for the ceremony to begin. The older woman's keen eyes missed nothing, from the tension in Sophia's shoulders to the absence of family members on her side. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. Your home is lovely." "Eleanor, please, we're family now." She took Sophia's hands in hers. "Or at least, that's what everyone here believes." Sophia's composure faltered. Don't worry, dear. My grandson hasn't confided in me, but I've known Adrian since he was born. This arrangement has his mathematical precision written all over it." Eleanor's voice remained kind. "I simply want you to know that regardless of how this marriage began, you have an ally in me." Before Sophia could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared. "It's time." Adrian waited beneath a pergola overlooking the Atlantic, the November sunlight casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. When Sophia appeared at the end of the aisle, something unexpected flickered in his expression. For a moment, calculation vanished, replaced by genuine appreciation. They exchanged vows with perfect composure, two accomplished professionals executing a contract. Only Eleanor noticed how Adrian's hand trembled slightly as he slid the platinum band onto Sophia's finger. The penthouse adaptation happened with clinical efficiency. Adrian's team converted the East Wing into Sophia's private domain, a bedroom suite, home office, and small laboratory equipped with essential instruments for preliminary research work. "Your access card works on all doors," Adrian explained during the tour, "though I would appreciate advance notice before you enter my private spaces." "That won't be necessary," Sophia replied. "I intend to respect our boundaries completely." They established protocols with the precision of diplomatic negotiations, scheduled joint appearances, communication procedures for household matters, use of shared spaces. On their third evening as a married couple, they sat at opposite ends of the dining table, eating a meal prepared by Adrian's chef. "The research facility renovation is proceeding on schedule," Adrian said, breaking the silence. "Your team should be able to move in within 3 weeks." "Thank you." Sophia set down her fork. "I've prepared a public narrative about our relationship that should satisfy curiosity without inviting too many questions. We met through professional circles, connected over shared interests in medical technology applications, and had a whirlwind romance." Adrian nodded approvingly. "Vague enough to be believable, specific enough to discourage further inquiry." "Exactly." Eleanor visited the following week, observing their performance with knowing eyes. She found Sophia in her laboratory space, reviewing research files. "This is quite an elaborate charade you two have constructed," Eleanor commented. Sophia looked up from her microscope. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. So my grandson keeps saying." Eleanor studied the younger woman. "What happens when feelings complicate your elegant equation?" "They won't," Sophia stated with certainty. "We both understand the parameters." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Life rarely respects parameters, my dear." Their first public appearance as newlyweds came at the Guggenheim Winter Gala. Adrian had attended solo in previous years, making perfunctory appearances before departing early. This time, with Sophia on his arm in a stunning red gown, he found himself lingering. "That's Martin Reeves," Adrian murmured, guiding Sophia with a gentle hand at the small of her back. "Tech venture capitalist, considering a major investment in our quantum security division." Sophia smiled warmly as they approached. "Mr. Reeves, Adrian has spoken so highly of your work with emerging technologies." The conversation flowed easily, Sophia's scientific background allowing her to engage meaningfully on technical subjects while her natural warmth softened Adrian's usual intensity. When they moved to the next group, Adrian looked at her with new appreciation. "You're very good at this," he noted. "Scientific conferences require similar skills, different content, same performance." Her smile remained in place for the benefit of onlookers. As weeks passed, they attended charity functions, industry events, and dinner parties. Photographs appeared in business and society publications, New York's most intriguing power couple, the tech genius and the brilliant medical researcher. Their public narrative gained traction, their performance increasingly seamless. In late January, they hosted a dinner for Blackwood's executive team. Adrian observed as Sophia charmed his normally reserved CFO, drawing out the woman's rarely seen humor. She remembered details about each guest, children's names, recent achievements, personal interests. "Your wife is remarkable," his COO commented as Adrian poured drinks in the kitchen. "She's nothing like the women you usually date." Adrian found himself answering honestly. "She's unlike anyone I've met." Later that night, after their guests departed, they stood together in the kitchen, loosening ties and removing high heels. "That went well," Sophia said, massaging her neck. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, offering one to her. "Thank you. Your presence made it significantly more successful than previous corporate events." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the glass. Neither acknowledged the momentary contact. Routines evolved within the penthouse. Though they maintained separate spaces, they began sharing breakfast most mornings. Adrian would read financial news while Sophia reviewed research data. Occasional comments became regular conversations. "You're missing the implications," Sophia said one morning, pointing to an article about genetic privacy legislation that Adrian had dismissed. "It won't pass in its current form." "Perhaps not, but the underlying public concern is valid. Your quantum encryption could offer a solution for medical data that maintains both security and accessibility." Adrian considered this. "You're suggesting a healthcare application? One with significant market potential and genuine social benefit." That evening, Adrian called his innovation team to explore the concept. In February, Sophia's research facility opened. Adrian attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surprising both Sophia and her team with his genuine interest in their work. He asked pointed, intelligent questions and offered computational resources beyond what they had requested. "Your husband is not what I expected," commented Dr. Lin, Sophia's lead researcher, after Adrian departed. "How so?" Sophia asked. "He actually listened. Most funders want the abbreviated version with emotional hooks. He wanted to understand the methodology." Sophia watched Adrian's car pull away. "He appreciates precision." At home, their carefully delineated boundaries began to blur. Adrian found himself working in the living room instead of his office when Sophia was reading research papers on the couch. Sophia began using the main kitchen rather than her kitchenette, often cooking while Adrian reviewed reports at the counter. Neither acknowledged these shifts. To do so would require examining feelings neither was prepared to recognize. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're enjoying this story of Adrian and Sophia's evolving relationship, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Ross Story Trail. Your support helps us continue bringing these meaningful narratives to life, and you'll never miss our next powerful story. Now, let's continue with the unexpected developments in what was supposed to be a purely business arrangement. In March, Adrian returned from a business trip to Tokyo at 2 a.m., exhausted from 18 hours of negotiations. He expected a dark, silent penthouse. Instead, he found Sophia asleep at the dining table, surrounded by research files, her head resting on folded arms. He stood watching her for a moment, this brilliant woman who had slipped into his life through a contract and was now somehow becoming essential to it. Her dedication to her work matched his own, yet she brought a humanity to her ambition that he recognized was missing in himself. Adrian placed his suit jacket over her shoulders. The gentle weight caused her to stir. "You're back," she murmured, blinking sleepily. "You should be in bed," he replied. "Breakthrough in the enzyme stabilization process. Couldn't stop." She straightened, running a hand through disheveled hair. "How was Tokyo?" "Successful." The Nakamura Group signed. Sophia smiled genuinely. "Congratulations. That's the partnership you've been pursuing for months." Adrian realized with surprise that she'd been paying attention to his work, just as he'd begun following the progress of her research. "You should get some real sleep," he said, helping gather her papers. Their hands met over a scatter of graphs. For a moment, neither moved. "Adrian," she began, then stopped herself. "Yes?" Sophia withdrew her hand. "Nothing. You're right, it's late." As she walked to her wing of the penthouse, still wearing his jacket around her shoulders, Adrian found himself wondering if their performance was becoming something neither had anticipated. The April issue of Business Insider featured Adrian and Sophia Blackwood on its cover, the power couple revolutionizing med tech integration. The article detailed how their partnership had accelerated breakthrough research while boosting Blackwood Innovation's stock price. Sophia's research facility had become a showcase for Adrian's corporate visitors, demonstrating the practical applications of his quantum computing technology. In his glass-walled office across Manhattan, Dominic Fraser hurled the magazine against the wall. "Look at this puff piece," he snarled to his executive assistant. "The market darling finds his princess, and everyone swoons." Dominic had founded Fraser Technologies 3 years before Adrian launched Blackwood Innovations. The companies had initially pursued different market segments until Adrian expanded into secure cloud infrastructure, Fraser's primary revenue source. Within 18 months, Blackwood had captured 40% of Fraser's market share. "Their marriage seems to have improved his public image considerably," his assistant noted. "The board's confidence is at an all-time high." "It's too perfect," Dominic muttered, retrieving the magazine and studying the photograph of Adrian and Sophia at a charity gala. Blackwood was notorious for avoiding commitment. Then suddenly he's married to a brilliant researcher who happens to need his technology for her groundbreaking work. Convenient timing, considering his grandfather's will stipulation. "You think it's arranged?" Dominic's eyes narrowed. "Find out everything about Dr. Sophia Chen, where she came from, her research history, previous relationships, financial situation before marriage. Everything. That could take weeks. Then, start now." Dominic tossed the magazine into the trash. "Adrian Blackwood took everything from me once. I won't let him do it again." Sophia woke at 3 a.m., her heart racing, sweat soaking her nightgown despite the cool temperature of her bedroom. The familiar symptoms had returned, stronger this time. She stumbled to her bathroom, fumbling in the medicine cabinet for the prescription bottle hidden behind mundane toiletries. Her hands shook as she swallowed the medication, then gripped the marble countertop, waiting for the dizziness to pass. In the mirror, her reflection appeared ghostly, dark circles under her eyes, skin ashen. "Just stress," she whispered to herself. "The research is at a critical phase." But the rational part of her brain, the scientist who had studied this condition for years, recognized the progression. The treatments that had kept her stable were becoming less effective. The disease was advancing. She showered, dressed carefully to hide her pallor with strategic makeup, and prepared for the day. By the time she joined Adrian for breakfast, her mask of wellness was firmly in place. "You're up early," he commented, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. New data came in from the overnight cell cultures. She accepted the coffee gratefully, needing the caffeine. "How was your evening call with Hong Kong?" "Productive. They're interested in implementing our security protocol." Adrian studied her. "You look tired." "Thanks for the compliment," she replied with forced lightness. "That's not—" Adrian stopped himself. "The research center is demanding. Perhaps you should consider adjusting your schedule," says the man who worked until midnight for the past week. A brief smile crossed his face. "Fair point." Throughout April, Sophia's episodes increased in frequency and severity. Fatigue dragged at her constantly. Twice, she nearly fainted in her lab, explaining it away to concerned colleagues as low blood sugar or overwork. She doubled her medication dosage against medical advice, knowing the risks, but unable to compromise her research at this critical juncture. The treatment was showing promising results in preliminary trials. She couldn't falter now, not when they were so close to a breakthrough that could help thousands of children. And if she was honest with herself, another factor complicated her silence: the changing nature of her arrangement with Adrian. What had begun as a clear business transaction was evolving into something neither had anticipated. Revealing her condition now would fundamentally alter their dynamic in ways she wasn't prepared to face. The penthouse terrace became their unofficial meeting ground in the evenings. Adrian would pour wine while Sophia brought research updates. What began as polite information sharing evolved into substantive intellectual exchanges. "Your quantum processing approach could reduce our genetic sequencing time by 60%, Sophia explained one evening, sketching algorithms on a tablet. "If we integrate it with the cell culture automation, we could potentially run twice as many trial variations simultaneously." Adrian leaned closer, studying her calculations. The computational load would require dedicated server allocation. Worth it if it accelerates the timeline. Agreed. Adrian made notes on his own tablet. I'll have my team implement it tomorrow. Sophia glanced at him, surprised by his immediate support. That's a significant resource commitment. It's a logical application of available technology to a worthwhile objective. His voice remained matter-of-fact, but something in his expression had softened. Your research deserves every advantage we can provide. These conversations began extending beyond their respective work. They debated philosophical implications of technological advancement, ethical considerations in medical research, books they'd read, places they'd traveled. During a discussion about art one evening, Adrian mentioned his collection of contemporary pieces. I've noticed them, Sophia said. They're striking, but they all share a certain isolation, solitary figures or empty landscapes. Adrian looked startled, as if she'd revealed something he hadn't recognized himself. I hadn't considered the thematic connection. What drew you to them? He considered this question longer than his usual rapid responses. Perhaps they reflected something I recognized. The simple admission, a rare moment of personal vulnerability from a man who carefully maintained his composure, shifted something between them. Their conversation continued past midnight, moving from art to childhood memories to professional aspirations. When Sophia finally rose to retire for the night, Adrian spoke her name softly. She turned back. This arrangement has proven more beneficial than I anticipated, he said carefully. Sophia smiled. In ways neither of us expected, I think. In May, Adrian began inviting Sophia to key business meetings where her scientific expertise provided valuable perspective. She included him in research discussions where his computational insights accelerated their progress. Their professional collaboration flourished, bringing out strengths in each other that colleagues noticed with interest. What neither acknowledged openly was how they had begun anticipating the other's presence, how rooms felt emptier without the other person, how conversations with others seemed less engaging, how their separate lives were becoming gently, inevitably intertwined. The Metropolitan Club dinner with Japanese investors represented a critical milestone for Blackwood Innovation's Asian expansion. Adrian had pursued the Nakamura Group for months, knowing their partnership would establish his quantum security protocols as the global standard. Your wife will attend? Mr. Nakamura had asked during preliminary discussions. Of course, Adrian had replied, noticing how the Japanese businessman's interest had been piqued by Sophia's research during their facility tour. That evening, Sophia took special care with her appearance despite feeling worse than usual. The dizziness had intensified over the past week, accompanied by intermittent chest pain she couldn't ignore much longer. But tonight mattered to Adrian. One more performance. One more evening of maintaining the facade. She wore a black evening gown, elegant and understated. When she emerged from her wing of the penthouse, Adrian stared for a moment before speaking. You look beautiful, he said simply. The sincerity in his voice made her heart twist. If only this were real. If only they had met under different circumstances. If only she weren't running out of time. At the Metropolitan Club, crystal chandeliers illuminated the private dining room where Blackwood executives mingled with the Nakamura delegation. Adrian guided Sophia through introductions with a protective hand at the small of her back. Dr. Blackwood, your research applications for our quantum encryption are fascinating, said Mr. Nakamura. The pediatric implications alone justify our investment. Sophia smiled, ignoring the growing pressure in her chest. The computational acceleration has been revolutionary for our treatment protocols. Adrian's CFO began discussing financial projections. Sophia lifted her champagne glass, trying to focus on the conversation as the room tilted slightly. She set the glass down carefully, gripping the table edge. Adrian was midway through explaining their Asian market strategy when he noticed her distress. He faltered mid-sentence, a momentary break in his usually flawless presentations. Sophia, he murmured, leaning toward her. She tried to respond, to reassure him she was fine. Instead, the glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The sound cut through conversation like a gunshot. The world tilted violently. Darkness edged her vision. She clutched the table, feeling blood trickle from the corner of her mouth. Adrian, she whispered, then collapsed. His reaction was immediate, catching her before she hit the floor, barking orders for an ambulance, cradling her against his chest as panic replaced his usual composure. Stay with me, he pleaded, all pretense abandoned. Please, Sophia, stay with me. As consciousness faded, Sophia heard the raw emotion in his voice and realized with clarity. This had stopped being a performance for both of them long ago. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Adrian paced outside the emergency treatment room. His usual controlled demeanor had shattered completely. Board members and executives who had witnessed Sophia's collapse watched with shock as their unflappable CEO demanded immediate answers from medical staff, his voice cracking with emotion. "Mr. Blackwood," a doctor finally emerged. "I'm Dr. Reynolds, attending physician." "How is she?" Adrian demanded. "Stabilized for now. We've administered medication to regulate her cardiac function and reduce the inflammation. The blood work confirms what we suspected based on her medical history." Adrian froze. "Medical history?" Dr. Reynolds looked confused. "Yes, the Kawasaki-Turner syndrome. It's documented in her records from Columbia Presbyterian. She's been managing it for nearly 8 years. The words struck Adrian like physical blows. Kawasaki-Turner syndrome, the very condition Sophia's research aimed to treat. The disease she had never once mentioned having herself. "There must be a mistake," he said numbly. "I understand this is difficult," Dr. Reynolds continued. "The adult manifestation is rare but typically more aggressive than the pediatric form. Dr. Chen has been receiving experimental treatments that kept her condition manageable, but her recent blood work indicates significant progression." Adrian struggled to process this information. What does that mean for her prognosis? The doctor hesitated. "Without intervention, a cardiovascular and neurological deterioration will accelerate. However, her own research represents the most promising treatment avenue currently available." Vivian Park arrived 30 minutes later, rushing down the corridor with fear etched across her face. She stopped short at the sight of Adrian. "You didn't know," she stated, reading his expression. "Why wouldn't she tell me?" The question contained more hurt than Adrian had allowed himself to express in years. Vivian sighed. Sophia has spent her entire career ensuring her condition didn't define her work. She was afraid that if potential research partners knew she had KTS, they would question her objectivity or assume her findings were compromised by personal bias. "I'm her husband," Adrian said, the word carrying weight he hadn't intended it to bear. "Are you?" Vivian challenged quietly. "Or are you her business partner in an arrangement that specifically prized professional detachment?" The question landed with precision, forcing Adrian to confront the contradictions of their relationship, the contractual beginning that had evolved into something neither had named. Later, when Sophia regained consciousness, she found Adrian sitting beside her bed, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes revealing a night without sleep. "How long have you known?" he asked softly. Sophia didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Since college. My roommate died from it. That's when I got tested and discovered I carried the genetic markers." "And your research?" "Started as self-preservation," she admitted, "but became much more. Those children, their condition progresses much faster than the adult version. They don't have time for my pride or privacy concerns." Adrian took her hand, surprising them both. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question contained layers neither was ready to fully examine. Sophia met his gaze directly. "Our arrangement was clear. You needed a wife for business purposes. I needed funding for research. My health wasn't relevant to those terms." "It became relevant," Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion, "when I started caring about you beyond any contract." The admission hung between them, changing everything. #Act 4, The Truth, Part 1. The private hospital room filled with morning light as Sophia sat up against her pillows, color gradually returning to her face. Adrian had arranged for the best medical team in New York, specialists in Kawasaki-Turner syndrome pulled from research institutions across the country. "The adult manifestation differs significantly from the pediatric version," Sophia explained, her scientist's voice emerging despite her position as patient. "The onset is slower, symptoms more subtle. Cardiovascular inflammation occurs in micro-episodes rather than acute attacks." Adrian sat beside her bed, his laptop open to medical journal articles he'd spent the night studying. "Yet the progression remains fatal without intervention." She nodded. "Eventually, yes. But over years rather than months." "How long have you been symptomatic?" "The first episode happened during my second year of graduate school. Minor arrhythmia, unexplained fatigue, nothing dramatic." Sophia adjusted her position, wincing slightly. "The genetic test confirmed what I suspected. My mother had similar symptoms before she died, though she was never properly diagnosed." Adrian's fingers hovered over his keyboard. "The treatment protocol you've been following?" "My own design. Based on preliminary research, an enzyme regulator combined with targeted immunosuppression, Sophia's clinical tone faltered slightly. It worked well until recently. And you didn't think this information might be relevant to share? The question carried no accusation, only confused hurt. Sophia looked out the window. At first, our arrangement didn't seem to warrant personal disclosures. Then, as things changed between us, she paused. I didn't want your perception of me to change. I didn't want to be a patient in your eyes. I would have helped accelerate the research. That's precisely why I couldn't tell you. Sophia turned back to him. My research needed to stand on its own scientific merit, not be prioritized because of my personal stake. The children we're trying to help deserve unbiased, methodical science, not desperate solutions from a researcher trying to save herself. Adrian studied her face, seeing beyond her composed expression to the burden she'd carried alone. You've been fighting this while carrying the weight of your entire research program, working late hours, managing a team, maintaining our public appearances. The work itself gives me purpose, she replied simply. Those children are why I push forward. #Act 4, The Truth, Part 2. Her name was May, Sophia said softly, her gaze distant with memory. My college roommate freshman year at MIT. Brilliant mathematician, terrible cook, loved Korean dramas at full volume. Adrian listened as Sophia's composure gave way to genuine emotion for the first time since he'd known her. We were study partners, constantly competing for top marks. Then during winter break, she developed what everyone thought was a severe flu. When she returned for spring semester, something was different. Fatigue, joint pain, occasional dizzy spells. Sophia's hands twisted in the hospital blanket. The campus health center misdiagnosed her 3 times. By the time she saw a specialist, the cardiac inflammation was advanced. She died 2 weeks before finals. The hospital room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. After the funeral, I couldn't focus. Her symptoms kept replaying in my mind. I had the same occasional joint pain, the same unexplained fatigue everyone attributed to academic stress. Sophia continued. I convinced a professor to help me get genetic testing. The results showed I carried the KTS markers. Sophia described how she'd abandoned her original plan to pursue theoretical physics, instead channeling her fear and grief into medical research. I tracked down Dr. Hammond, the only researcher focusing specifically on adult KTS manifestation, became his lab assistant, then doctoral student. When his funding dried up, I continued the work. Adrian listened with growing comprehension. Your roommate's death wasn't just a tragedy you witnessed. It was a preview of what might await you. The pediatric version progresses rapidly. Many children don't survive past 12. The adult version advances more slowly, but with similar outcomes. Sophia's voice strengthened. Every breakthrough in our research has extended my own timeline while moving us closer to helping those children. The night we met at the gala, Adrian recalled, when you spoke about children facing shortened lifespans, you were also talking about yourself. Sophia nodded. Every day in the lab, I'm working against 2 clocks. Theirs just runs faster than mine. Adrian left the hospital briefly to change clothes and review urgent business matters that couldn't wait. In his penthouse, he moved through rooms that now felt different, seeing evidence of Sophia's presence everywhere. The kitchen contained her favorite tea. Her medical journals were stacked neatly on the living room shelf beside his business texts. A spare lab coat hung by the door. In her private study, which he entered with hesitation, he found research papers organized in meticulous files. Among them was a personal medical log, years of careful documentation tracking her own symptoms, medication adjustments, and treatment responses. The clinical notations revealed what Sophia had hidden behind her composed exterior: progressively worsening episodes, increased medication dosages, side effects managed without complaint. Adrian sat heavily in her desk chair, confronting a truth he'd been avoiding. Somewhere along their carefully contracted journey, Sophia had become essential to him. Not as a business arrangement, not as a research partner, but as the person who had, without intention or effort, breached the walls he'd built around himself. When he returned to the hospital, he found Sophia reviewing lab results with her medical team, directing her own treatment with precise technical language. Even in a hospital gown, she commanded respect from doctors twice her age. Watching her through the glass door, Adrian recognized what truly set Sophia apart from anyone he'd known. It wasn't just her intelligence or competence. It was her complete dedication to purpose beyond herself. While he had built his company to prove his own worth, she pursued her research to save lives she might never see. She had accepted their marriage contract not for personal gain but to advance work that might help thousands of children and incidentally extend her own life. Yet she'd kept her condition private to ensure her research would be judged on merit alone. The realization humbled him. All his life, Adrian had measured value in terms of efficiency, productivity, and profit. Sophia's measure was entirely different. Impact, purpose, integrity. When the doctors left, he entered her room with newfound clarity. The business arrangement that had brought them together suddenly seemed shallow compared to the woman herself. "Your team seems optimistic about the treatment modifications," he said, taking his place beside her bed. "The enzyme stabilization protocol shows promise." She studied his expression. "You've been thinking?" "Yes." Adrian took her hand, a gesture that had once been calculated for public appearances but now felt necessary. "I've been thinking that you might be the most remarkable person I've ever met." Eleanor Blackwood arrived the following morning, bringing fresh flowers and a no-nonsense attitude that scattered nervous hospital staff. "Grandmother," Adrian greeted her in the hallway, "I didn't expect you. Did you think I wouldn't come when my grandson's wife was hospitalized?" Eleanor handed him the flowers. "Find a vase for these. I need a moment with Sophia." Adrian recognized the tone that had brooking no argument since his childhood. "She needs rest. She needs honest conversation, which is what I intend to provide." Eleanor straightened her impeccable silk blouse. "Go handle whatever business requires your attention. We'll be fine." Inside the hospital room, Eleanor settled into the chair beside Sophia's bed with the grace of a woman half her age. "So," she began without preamble, "the marriage arrangement has become complicated." Sophia blinked in surprise. "You knew?" "My dear, I've watched Adrian calculate every move since he was 7 years old, playing chess against his grandfather." Eleanor's eyes were kind but penetrating. "Your wedding had all the emotional spontaneity of a corporate merger." Despite everything, Sophia laughed. "That obvious?" "To me, yes. Though I must say something has changed recently." Eleanor leaned forward. "My grandson has not left this hospital for more than an hour since you were admitted. That was not in your contract, I imagine?" "No," Sophia admitted. "It wasn't." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Gerald and I had an arranged marriage, you know." "You and Adrian's grandfather?" "Indeed. Family business considerations in the 1960s. Very proper, very practical." Eleanor smiled at the memory. "I despised him initially. Thought him arrogant and cold. What changed? Time revealed his true character. Beneath the business exterior was a man of profound integrity and unexpected tenderness." Eleanor adjusted Sophia's blanket with grandmotherly care. "We had 52 years together. The arrangement became a choice we made every day." Sophia absorbed this. "Adrian and I started with clear boundaries. Boundaries shift when hearts are involved." Eleanor studied her. "The question is whether you're brave enough to acknowledge what's happening between you." "My condition complicates everything," Sophia said quietly. "I won't become his burden." Eleanor's expression sharpened. "That's not your decision to make. When we truly care for someone, their challenges become privileges to share, not burdens to bear." She reached for Sophia's hand. "My grandson has spent his life building walls to protect himself from loss. Since his parents died, he's measured everything by what he might lose rather than what he might gain." "I don't want him to stay out of obligation," Sophia whispered. "Then give him the dignity of choice," Eleanor replied firmly. "Real love isn't about protecting people from difficulty. It's about facing difficulty together." As Eleanor prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Whatever began this marriage, something genuine has grown within it. Don't discard that out of fear or pride." Friends of the Mr. Ross Story Trail, if you're feeling the emotional journey of Adrian and Sophia right now, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Your support means everything as we continue bringing these powerful stories of transformation to life. Now, let's continue with this pivotal moment in their relationship. The hospital discharge came 3 days later. Adrian had transformed the penthouse, creating a recovery space that balanced medical necessities with comfort. Sophia's research team had been briefed, not about her condition, respecting her privacy, but about her temporary absence. The apartment didn't need this much modification, Sophia protested as Adrian showed her the adjustments. Relocated furniture for easier navigation, a specialized bed that could elevate if breathing difficulties occurred, monitoring equipment discreetly integrated into the decor. "The medical team suggested most of these changes," Adrian replied. "They suggested, and you implemented everything immediately, I'm sure." She smiled weakly. Your efficiency is showing, not efficiency, priority. The simple correction carried weight. That evening, Sophia found strength to sit on the terrace, wrapped in blankets despite the warm May air. Adrian joined her, bringing tea and her medication. Your research team made progress with the modified enzyme protocol, he said. Dr. Lin thinks the stabilization factor could be improved with the computational model we discussed last month. You've been working with my team? Sophia asked, surprised. Providing computational support only. The scientific direction remains entirely with your specialists. Adrian hesitated. I hope that was appropriate. More than appropriate. Thank you. She studied his profile in the fading light. Adrian, we need to discuss the contract. His expression tightened. What about it? My condition changes the parameters. You entered this arrangement expecting a partner capable of fulfilling certain obligations, public appearances, professional networking, maintaining appearances. Sophia, please let me finish. She straightened, summoning her professional voice. My health will likely deteriorate further before the treatment protocol advances. There will be more episodes, more hospitalizations. I can't fulfill my side of our agreement. Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice held an emotion she'd never heard from him before. When you collapsed at the Metropolitan Club, do you know what went through my mind? He turned to face her fully. Not the business implications, not the Nakamura deal. I thought I was watching the most important person in my life slip away. Sophia's breath caught. The contract brought you into my life, Adrian continued. But what's grown between us has nothing to do with signatures or obligations. I don't want you to fulfill contractual terms. I want you here because... He paused, struggling with words that had never come easily to him. Because my life makes sense with you in it. He reached for her hand, holding it between both of his. I don't care about public appearances or professional advantages. I care about you, your mind, your determination, your courage. Sophia felt tears threatening. This isn't what you signed up for. No, Adrian agreed softly. It's infinitely more valuable than anything I could have anticipated. As night fell over Manhattan, their carefully constructed business arrangement continued its transformation into something neither had sought but, both now recognized, a partnership based not on convenience or advantage, but on genuine understanding and deepening emotion. The Blackwood Innovations Executive Board watched in stunned silence as Adrian outlined his restructuring plan. The presentation displayed on the conference room screens was meticulous, detailed, and utterly unexpected. The Medical Technologies Division will become our primary focus for the next 18 months, Adrian explained, highlighting the organizational chart. We're reallocating 30% of our quantum computing resources to accelerate the Kawasaki-Turner treatment protocol. Patricia, his chief legal officer, raised her hand. Adrian, while we all support Dr. Chen's recovery, this represents a significant departure from our 5-year growth strategy. It's not a departure, it's an evolution, Adrian countered. The medical applications of our quantum technology represent an untapped market with both financial and humanitarian potential. The CFO frowned at the projections. The RAND costs are substantial, as are the projected returns. Adrian's voice remained steady. More importantly, this represents an opportunity to save lives while demonstrating practical applications of our technology. The meeting continued for 3 hours as Adrian addressed every concern with characteristic precision. By the end, even the most skeptical board members had reluctantly approved the restructuring. His lingered after others departed. This isn't just business for you anymore, is it? Adrian considered the question. 6 months ago he would have deflected, maintaining the professional facade he'd perfected. Now, he simply answered honestly. No, it's not just business. Within weeks, Blackwood Tower underwent a transformation. The 38th floor was converted into an advanced research facility, where Sophia's team collaborated directly with Adrian's quantum computing specialists. Custom equipment was installed. Additional researchers were hired. Resources previously allocated to market expansion were redirected to accelerate the treatment protocol. Adrian worked 18-hour days, dividing his time between running his company and supporting the research initiative. He learned the terminology of genetic medicine, mastered the fundamentals of enzyme stabilization, and applied his computational expertise to problems that had stalled Sophia's team for months. For the first time in his career, profit margins weren't his primary motivation. Each breakthrough brought them closer to a treatment that could help thousands of children and the woman who had unexpectedly claimed a place at the center of his life. Sophia returned to work gradually, balancing recovery with her determination to advance the research. She found Adrian had established a temporary office adjacent to her laboratory, allowing him to provide computational support while remaining close if she needed him. Their collaboration deepened as weeks passed. Adrian's analytical approach complemented Sophia's intuitive scientific leaps. Where she saw biological pathways, he saw data patterns. Where he developed processing algorithms, she identified practical applications. The enzyme degradation follows a predictable sequence, Sophia explained one evening, gesturing to molecular models hovering in the laboratory's holographic display. If we could stabilize this bond at the critical moment, we'd need precise timing. Adrian finished her thought, already typing calculations. A computational trigger based on molecular indicators. They worked like this for hours, completing each other's sentences, building on each other's ideas, creating something neither could have developed alone. Beyond the laboratory, their home life shifted subtly. The invisible boundaries between their separate spaces dissolved. Adrian moved his personal desk into the main living area where Sophia often read research papers. Sophia began using the primary kitchen rather than her kitchenette, often cooking while discussing the day's progress. Small, meaningful gestures replaced their former, carefully maintained distance. Adrian learned to brew Sophia's tea exactly as she preferred. Sophia recognized the subtle signs of Adrian's tension headaches and would silently dim the lights and provide pain medication before he asked. One evening, they reviewed research data on the living room couch, shoulders touching as they shared a tablet. Sophia dozed off, her head gradually coming to rest against Adrian's shoulder. Instead of waking her or moving away, he adjusted his position to make her more comfortable, continuing his work one-handed while she slept. When Eleanor visited for dinner the following week, she observed their unconscious synchronicity, how they moved around each other in the kitchen, anticipated needs, shared private glances. "The arrangement suits you," she commented as Adrian walked her to the elevator. "It's not an arrangement anymore," he replied simply. Eleanor smiled. "I can see that." Dominic Fraser studied the medical records his investigator had obtained through questionable means. The file detailed Sophia Chen Blackwood's 8-year battle with Kawasaki-Turner syndrome, the very disease her research aimed to treat. "Interesting," he murmured, scanning the documentation. "She's not just a researcher, she's a patient." His assistant shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, using medical information this way could be legally problematic." "We're not using it yet," Dominic corrected. "We're assessing its strategic value." The potential was clear. Blackwood Innovations' sudden pivot to medical technology made perfect sense in light of Sophia's condition. Adrian wasn't pursuing humanitarian goals. He was desperately trying to save his wife. This narrative could be weaponized. Investors would question whether Adrian's judgment was compromised by personal interests. Regulatory bodies might scrutinize whether Sophia's research was objectively sound or desperately self-serving. Dominic initiated his plan carefully. A financial analyst received an anonymous tip questioning the objectivity of Blackwood's medical research. A regulatory consultant raised concerns about conflict of interest in pending FDA applications. A medical ethics professor was provided with carefully selected information for a journal article on researcher objectivity. The whispers spread through financial and medical circles. Blackwood Innovations' stock price dipped as questions mounted. Research partners became hesitant. Potential investors delayed commitments. Adrian identified the source quickly. "Fraser," he told Sophia, showing her the pattern of information leaks. "He's using your medical history to undermine confidence in both the company and your research." Sophia paled. "How did he obtain my records?" "Illegally, without question." "We'll address that." Adrian's jaw tightened. "The immediate concern is the damage to the research timeline. The FDA review committee is requesting additional validation studies based on these ethical concerns." "The children can't wait for these delays," Sophia said, frustration evident. "Every month matters in disease progression." Adrian made a decision. "We need to address this directly." "Exposing my condition publicly?" Sophia asked. "Only if you're comfortable doing so. This is your private medical information." Sophia considered this, scientist and patient weighing the options. "If making my condition public accelerates the treatment for those children, then there's no choice to make." The press conference was Adrian's idea, but the approach was Sophia's. Rather than a defensive response to rumors, they positioned it as a transparent discussion of innovation driven by personal experience. Major medical journalists, industry analysts, and investment representatives filled Blackwood Tower's conference center. Adrian began with a brief introduction, then yielded the podium to Sophia. She stood before the assembled press with calm dignity. 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with adult-onset Kawasaki-Turner syndrome, the same condition my research aims to treat. Today, I'm choosing to share this information, not because rumors have forced my hand, but because transparency serves the greater good. The room fell silent as Sophia explained how her personal experience informed, but didn't compromise her scientific methodology. She presented data validation protocols, independent review procedures, and rigorous testing standards that exceeded industry requirements. My personal stake in this research doesn't diminish its validity. It enhances its urgency and commitment to excellence, she concluded. Every researcher brings personal motivation to their work. Mine is simply more direct than most. When questions turned accusatory, Adrian stepped forward. The protective hand he placed at the small of Sophia's back was not for show but instinctive support. Dr. Blackwood's condition was disclosed to all relevant regulatory bodies from the beginning, he stated firmly. What wasn't disclosed to the public was her right to medical privacy, a right that was violated through illegal means. A reporter pressed further. But isn't Blackwood Innovations' focus on this treatment protocol driven by your personal interests rather than sound business strategy? Adrian's response revealed how profoundly he had changed. If sound business strategy doesn't align with saving lives, then perhaps we should question our definition of sound strategy. Yes, this research matters to me personally. It should matter to everyone personally. These are children's lives, not abstract market shares. The united front they presented, the brilliant researcher and the business titan standing together, shifted the narrative completely. By the following week, the FDA review was back on track. Research partnerships had solidified, and Blackwood's stock had not only recovered but reached new highs. Dominic Fraser's attempt to exploit Sophia's condition had backfired, strengthening both the public perception of the Blackwoods and their private bond. The summer evening found Adrian and Sophia on their penthouse terrace, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in gold and pink. A bottle of wine sat between them, Sophia's glass filled with sparkling water due to her medication regimen. The modified treatment protocol is showing remarkable results in preliminary trials, Sophia said, reviewing data on her tablet. Enzyme stability has improved by 40%. The computational modeling suggests we could improve that further by adjusting the delivery mechanism, Adrian added, his tablet displaying complex molecular simulations. They discussed technical details as the sky darkened and city lights emerged like stars. Their conversation flowed seamlessly between scientific collaboration and personal connection, no longer delineating between professional partnership and something deeper. When Sophia shivered slightly in the evening breeze, Adrian instinctively placed his jacket around her shoulders. The gesture was automatic now, not calculated. I've been thinking about the East Wing, he said after a comfortable silence. What about it? It seems unnecessary to maintain separate living spaces at this point. Sophia looked at him, measuring his meaning. Are you suggesting a change to our arrangement? I'm acknowledging that our arrangement changed long ago. Adrian turned to face her fully. The separate spaces were appropriate for a business contract. They feel artificial now. Sophia considered this. And what would you propose instead? A home, Adrian said simply. Not your space and my space, but our space. The significance of this suggestion wasn't lost on either of them. For a man who had guarded his privacy and independence fiercely, inviting true integration of their lives represented a fundamental transformation. Our space, Sophia repeated softly, testing the concept. Unless you prefer the current arrangement, Adrian added, a rare uncertainty in his voice. Sophia reached for his hand. I think our space accurately reflects where we are now. The moment was interrupted by an urgent message on Adrian's phone. He frowned as he read it. What is it? Sophia asked. The FDA is blocking our application for expanded clinical trials, he said, disbelief in his voice. Despite all our additional data and transparency, that doesn't make sense with the preliminary results we've shown. Adrian's expression darkened as he read further. It's not about the science. Fraser Technologies has filed a competing application and is claiming intellectual property interference. They have no basis for that claim, Sophia protested. They don't need basis. They just need to create delays. Adrian's hand tightened around hers. Dominic Fraser is escalating this beyond business competition. He's targeting your research directly. The peace of their evening shattered, replaced by the realization that their most significant challenge still lay ahead, one that would test not just their research and company, but the bond forming between them. The breakthrough came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in early July. Sophia had been working through the night in the laboratory, running simulation after simulation with the enhanced quantum processing model Adrian had developed. She was alone when the final analysis completed, the screen illuminating her exhausted face with its conclusive results. "Adrian," she called, her voice barely a whisper as she studied the data. Then louder, punching the intercom button. "Adrian." He appeared minutes later, hair disheveled, still wearing the dress shirt and slacks from yesterday's meetings. "What happened?" he asked, immediately alert, despite having fallen asleep at his desk just 2 hours earlier. Sophia gestured to the screen, her hands trembling with excitement and fatigue. "The enzyme stabilization protocol. It's working. Not just incrementally, definitively." Adrian moved beside her, scanning the complex molecular models and data points. Though the technical aspects of genetic medicine had once been foreign to him, months of immersion had given him the expertise to recognize the significance of what he was seeing. "The neural pathway degradation has halted completely," he noted, pointing to a key indicator. "And cardiac inflammation reduced by 73%, Sophia added. "This goes beyond management. It's approaching actual reversal of symptoms." They stared at each other, the weight of this moment settling between them. This wasn't just a scientific achievement. It was hope for thousands of children, and for Sophia herself. "We need to move to human trials immediately," Adrian said, already reaching for his phone. "I'll have the legal team prepare the FDA submission today." Within 48 hours, their expanded clinical trial application was complete. Hundreds of pages of data, protocols, safety measures, and preliminary results. The scientific case was irrefutable. With Adrian's resources behind the submission, they expected expedited review. What they received instead was a bureaucratic nightmare. "Application denied pending intellectual property review," Adrian read from the official response, disbelief evident in his voice. "Additional concerns regarding researcher objectivity require independent verification of all submitted data." Sophia's research team gathered in the conference room, faces showing a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "This makes no sense," Dr. Lin protested. "Our IP documentation is immaculate. The independent verification was already included in our submission." Adrian exchanged a look with Sophia. They both recognized what was happening. "This isn't about science or procedure," he said quietly. "This is Dominic Fraser using his regulatory connections to block us." The FDA's decision represented more than a procedural delay. For the children waiting for treatment, it meant continued suffering. For Sophia, whose symptoms had stabilized with a preliminary treatment but not reversed, it meant precious time lost. The research had reached its most promising point, just as the path to helping actual patients became blocked by an invisible wall of influence and manipulation. Dominic Fraser's corner office offered a view of Central Park, though he rarely spared it a glance. His attention remained fixed on his computer screen, displaying Blackwood Innovations' latest press release about their groundbreaking KTS treatment protocol. "They're positioning this as a humanitarian breakthrough rather than a business venture," his assistant noted, setting a coffee on his desk. "Because Adrian Blackwood has lost his business edge," Dominic replied. "He's making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy." The intercom buzzed. "Sir, Commissioner Phillips from the FDA is on line 1. Dominic smiled thinly. "Right on schedule." The conversation was brief, coded in regulatory language that provided plausible deniability. No explicit requests were made, no overt pressure applied. Just a former college roommate expressing concerns about a high-profile application that might benefit from additional scrutiny. When the call ended, Dominic leaned back in his chair, satisfaction evident in his expression. The regulatory delays would continue indefinitely, or until Adrian Blackwood came to him directly. The confrontation Dominic had engineered occurred 3 days later at the annual Healthcare Innovation Summit. Both men were scheduled speakers, their presentations separated by a single panel discussion. "Adrian," Dominic greeted him in the green room, extending his hand as if they were casual acquaintances rather than bitter rivals. "Compelling research your wife is pursuing. Shame about the regulatory complications." Adrian didn't take the offered hand. "Cut the performance, Dominic. We both know you're manipulating the FDA review process." Such a serious accusation. Dominic's false concern didn't reach his eyes. "The FDA maintains rigorous independence in their evaluations. Commissioner Phillips was your roommate at Princeton. The deputy director of pharmaceutical review worked for your company until last year." Adrian's voice remained controlled despite his anger. "You've placed obstacles in our path that have nothing to do with science or safety." Dominic dropped the pretense, his expression hardening. 3 years ago, You entered my market segment and systematically destroyed my company's primary revenue stream. Consider this appropriate response in kind. This isn't about market share, Adrian countered. This is about a treatment that could save children's lives. Convenient that it might also save your wife. Dominic smiled coldly. Everything is leverage, Adrian. You taught me that. He moved closer, lowering his voice. I can make the regulatory issues disappear by this afternoon. One phone call. In exchange for Blackwood Innovations' Quantum Security Division. Full transfer of patents and technology. At a reasonable valuation, of course. The demand struck at the heart of Adrian's company. The division he had built first, the foundation of his success. Without it, Blackwood would remain profitable, but would lose its competitive edge in the market he had pioneered. You're asking me to dismantle my company. I'm offering you a choice, Dominic corrected. Your company or your wife's research, business or personal. The Adrian Blackwood I knew would consider this an easy decision. As Dominic walked away to prepare for his presentation, he left Adrian facing the most difficult decision of his career and his life. Adrian sat alone in his office late that night. The city lights spread below him like a circuit board of possibilities and dead ends. On his desk lay 2 documents, the term sheet for transferring Blackwood's Quantum Security Division to Fraser Technologies, and the latest medical report on Sophia's condition. The business decision was clear. The Quantum Security Division represented technology he had spent a decade developing, the cornerstone of his company's valuation and future growth. Surrendering it would fundamentally alter Blackwood Innovations' market position and long-term viability. Yet as he reviewed Sophia's medical data, the human stakes became equally clear. The treatment protocol they had developed showed extraordinary promise, but her condition continued to progress, albeit more slowly. The longer clinical trials were delayed, the more children would suffer, and the more Sophia's own health remained at risk. Adrian had built his career on calculated decisions, weighing variables against projected outcomes. This situation defied such analysis. How did one quantify the value of groundbreaking technology against human lives? Against the life of someone who had become essential to his own? He pulled up the company valuation models, studying the projected impact of losing the Quantum Security Division. The financial analyst's assessment was grim but not catastrophic. Blackwood would survive, though significantly diminished. Then he opened the clinical projection for KTS patients without the new treatment protocol. The statistical models showed continued degradation, shortened lifespans, diminished quality of life. Clinical, impersonal, devastating in its implications. For the first time in his life, Adrian found himself unable to reach a logical conclusion. The metrics he had always relied upon failed to capture the true weights of his options. He was still reviewing documents when Sophia found him hours later, the first light of dawn painting the office in soft gold. "You haven't slept," she observed, setting a cup of coffee beside him. "There's a solution here," he replied, gesturing to the spread of documents. "I just haven't identified it yet." Sophia picked up the term sheet from Fraser Technologies, scanning it quickly. Her expression shifted from curiosity to understanding to alarm. "Adrian, you can't seriously be considering this. It resolves the FDA blockage immediately. By surrendering your life's work." Sophia set the document down firmly. "This is exactly what Dominic wants. You sacrificing your company's future. The company can recover eventually. The children waiting for this treatment don't have eventually." Adrian met her eyes directly. "You don't have eventually." Sophia stared at him, suddenly understanding the true nature of his deliberation. "You're considering this because of me." Adrian didn't deny it. "The treatment protocol would be available to you immediately with FDA approval." "No." Sophia's voice was firm. "I won't let you dismantle what you've built. Not for me, not for anyone. It's my decision to make. Not alone." "It isn't." Sophia moved around the desk to face him directly. "This was never just about business for you. Blackwood Innovations represents your vision for technology that matters. If we surrender to Fraser's manipulation, we betray that vision. What's the alternative?" Adrian asked, frustration evident in his voice. "We've exhausted the regulatory appeals process." Sophia considered this, her scientific mind analyzing the problem from different angles. "Perhaps we've been approaching this the wrong way. We're trying to fight through the system when we should be going around it." Adrian studied her, recognizing the shift in her expression that always preceded her most innovative insights. "What are you thinking?" The strategy they developed over the next 24 hours drew on both their strengths. Adrian's business acumen and media connections combined with Sophia's scientific credibility and human approach. Fraser has influence within the regulatory system, Adrian noted as they mapped out their plan. But the FDA ultimately answers to public opinion and political pressure, which means we need to make this story public in a way that transcends business competition, Sophia added. This can't be about Blackwood versus Fraser. It needs to be about children waiting for treatment. They divided responsibilities according to their strengths. Sophia would prepare a comprehensive presentation of the research findings for medical authorities and patient advocacy groups. Adrian would leverage his media connections to create public awareness. We need faces and stories, not just data, Sophia emphasized. With parental consent, we should highlight the children currently suffering from KTS. Make the human cost of these delays impossible to ignore. Adrian nodded. I'll have our communications team prepare video profiles of families affected by KTS, focusing on their day-to-day challenges and hopes for the treatment. Meanwhile, I'll organize a symposium for independent medical researchers to review our data, Sophia continued. Complete transparency, open to any qualified scientist. Live streamed for public access. Their complementary approaches reflected how thoroughly they had come to understand each other's strengths. Where Adrian once would have pursued aggressive legal action against Fraser, he now recognized the power of public sentiment. Where Sophia might have relied solely on scientific merit, she now appreciated the importance of narrative and perception. They worked through the night, their shared purpose creating a synergy that energized them despite physical exhaustion. By morning, the framework of their counter-strategy was complete. Fraser expects me to either surrender or fight him on regulatory grounds, Adrian said as they reviewed their plan. He won't anticipate this approach. Because he's thinking like a businessman, Sophia replied, not like a partner. The word hung between them, acknowledging what they had become to each other. Partners in the fullest sense, their individual strengths amplified through collaboration. Adrian reached for her hand across the table. We need to move quickly. Fraser will respond once he recognizes our strategy. Then let's not give him time to prepare, Sophia agreed, her eyes showing the determination that had first drawn Adrian to her. The campaign launched simultaneously across multiple channels. Medical journals published Sophia's preliminary findings with accompanying editorials about regulatory delays. News programs featured families affected by KTS, their stories heartbreaking in their simple honesty. Emma can't play soccer anymore, one mother explained, her daughter sitting beside her with braces on both legs. The inflammation in her joints progressed too quickly. The doctors say without new treatment options, she'll likely need a wheelchair by next year. Social media amplified these stories, creating a groundswell of public concern. The hashtag #ApproveX treatment began trending nationally. Meanwhile, Sophia hosted a scientific symposium where independent researchers reviewed the treatment protocol data in real time, asking questions and verifying results. The transparent process, unprecedented in its openness, generated excitement throughout the medical community. These results represent a potential paradigm shift in genetic treatment approaches, declared the chief of pediatric medicine at Johns Hopkins during the live stream. The FDA delay is scientifically indefensible based on the data presented today. Adrian coordinated the business response, meeting with major investors and industry leaders to explain the situation. Without directly accusing Fraser of manipulation, he presented the timeline of events that made the connection clear to anyone familiar with industry dynamics. As public pressure mounted, political figures began weighing in. A senator whose grandson had been diagnosed with KTS called for an investigation into the FDA's review process. Patient advocacy groups organized a march on Washington. Dominic Fraser watched his carefully constructed obstruction crumble under the weight of public sentiment. His attempts to counter the narrative, suggesting the treatment wasn't thoroughly tested, questioning Sophia's objectivity, only reinforced the perception that he was placing business interests above children's lives. When Commissioner Phillips called to inform him that the FDA would be granting accelerated review status to the KTS treatment protocol, Fraser knew he had miscalculated severely. The public pressure has made this untenable, Phillips explained apologetically. The Senate Health Committee is asking questions about our review process. The final blow came when Adrian received a call from the FDA director herself, bypassing the normal chain of command. Mr. Blackwood, I've reviewed the KTS treatment submission personally, she stated. In light of the compelling data and extraordinary circumstances, we're granting conditional approval for expanded clinical trials effective immediately. Adrian found Sophia in her laboratory, surrounded by her research team, as they prepared materials for what they had expected to be months of continued advocacy. "It's approved," he announced simply. The room erupted in cheers, researchers embracing each other as the significance registered. Years of work, months of fighting regulatory obstacles, all culminating in this moment of victory. When the celebration quieted, Adrian pulled Sophia aside, his expression both triumphant and tender. "We did this together," he said quietly. "Not as CEO and researcher, not as husband and wife on paper, as true partners." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of profound relief and something deeper. "The children will have their treatment. And you'll have yours," Adrian added, the concern he'd carried for months finally easing. As their research team prepared to implement the clinical trials that would bring hope to thousands of families, Adrian and Sophia stood together at the laboratory windows, their reflection unified in the glass, no longer two individuals bound by a contract, but partners united by purpose, respect, and an emotion neither had planned for but both now embraced. The penthouse transformed under Adrian's meticulous planning. Their 1-year anniversary, a date that once represented nothing more than a contractual milestone, had taken on profound significance. Crystal vases filled with white roses and orchids adorned every surface. Michelin-starred chefs prepared in the kitchen. Candlelight cast warm shadows across rooms, once illuminated by the harsh clarity of business arrangements. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks, surveying his work with uncharacteristic uncertainty. For a man accustomed to confidence in board meetings and multi-billion-dollar negotiations, this evening left him unsteady. The weight of the small velvet box in his jacket pocket reminded him of what he planned to do: replace their business arrangement with something genuine, offer a real marriage to replace their practical agreement. Across the penthouse in her private wing, a separation that now felt artificial, Sophia prepared differently. Her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the legal documents her attorney had delivered that morning. The papers released Adrian from their marriage contract with no penalty, no obligation to continue funding her research, no expectations beyond what he might freely choose to offer. 3 months into the clinical trials, her condition had stabilized. Children across the country were showing remarkable improvement with the treatment protocol. The FDA had fast-tracked full approval based on the extraordinary preliminary results. The research would continue with or without her personal connection to Adrian. She set the documents in a simple folder, then studied her reflection. The anniversary dress she'd chosen was elegant but understated, appropriate for what she needed to do tonight. The woman looking back at her seemed changed from the pragmatic scientist who had entered this arrangement a year ago. Her eyes held knowledge that transcended data and analysis, understanding of connection, of sacrifice, of feeling she had never intended to develop. "This is the right thing," she whispered to herself, though her heart protested the logic her mind had settled upon. He deserves to choose freely. Neither knew that their carefully planned evening worked toward opposite purposes, one to bind, one to release. Adrian's phone chimed with a message from the private dining room he'd reserved as backup. Everything was prepared there as well, should Sophia prefer to celebrate away from home. His assistant had arranged both options, understanding the significance of this evening to her normally reserved boss. As he confirmed the reservation, Adrian recalled the past months, how their clinical victory had transformed into personal hope. Sophia had begun receiving the treatment protocol she had developed, joining the clinical trial as both researcher and participant. Initial results showed promising stabilization of her condition. The deterioration had halted. Some symptoms had even begun to reverse. Through it all, their partnership had deepened beyond anything envisioned in their original agreement. They worked together, lived together, faced challenges together, the contractual framework of their relationship becoming increasingly irrelevant to its reality. Yet they had never directly addressed what they had become to each other. The arrangement remained officially unchanged despite its evolution. Tonight, Adrian intended to correct that discrepancy, to put into words what had grown between them, and offer a future based on choice rather than obligation. In her study, Sophia made final preparations of her own. Her lawyer had explained the dissolution process, how the contract could be terminated without disruption to the research funding through a separate grant structure Adrian had already established. "He's protected your work regardless of your personal arrangement," the lawyer had noted. Quite thorough. That knowledge only strengthened Sophia's resolve. Adrian had already ensured her research would continue independently. He had fulfilled every promise and more. Now she needed to offer him the same freedom he had secured for her. She gathered the folder in a small gift, a handcrafted watch she had commissioned months ago, its inner workings visible through crystal, a symbol of transparency replacing their former carefully constructed facades. As evening approached, both prepared to transform their relationship, unaware they moved in opposite directions. Dinner proceeded with a strange undercurrent of tension, despite the beautiful setting. Adrian had arranged for their first course to recreate the meal from the charity gala where they had met, a detail Sophia noticed immediately. "You remembered," she said, genuinely touched. "I remember everything about that night," Adrian replied. "How you spoke about your research without emotional manipulation. How you valued data over dramatics. How you saw potential in technology that others missed." His attention to detail, so characteristic of his approach to everything, now carried emotional weight that made Sophia's task more difficult. Each thoughtful gesture reinforced what she stood to lose. They discussed the clinical trial progress, the children showing remarkable improvement, the medical community's growing excitement about the treatment protocol. Professional topics felt safer than the personal conversation each was postponing. As dessert arrived, Adrian reached across the table for Sophia's hand. "This past year has been transformative, for the research, for the company, for me personally." Sophia took a deep breath. "Adrian, before you continue, there's something I need to discuss with you." She reached for the folder beside her chair, placing it on the table between them. "I've had these documents prepared. They release you from our contract with no penalties or obligations." Adrian stared at the folder, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "Our arrangement served its purpose," Sophia continued, forcing steadiness into her voice. "The research is succeeding, the company has adapted its focus successfully, and your grandfather's will requirements have been satisfied. There's no reason to continue a marriage that was never meant to be permanent." "No reason?" Adrian's voice was unusually quiet. "You've done more than fulfilled your obligations. The separate funding structure you established ensures the research continues regardless of our personal arrangement." Sophia pushed the folder closer to him. "You should be free to move forward without the constraints of our agreement." Adrian made no move to take the documents. "Is this what you want, Sophia?" The question contained layers she wasn't prepared to address directly. "What I want is irrelevant to the practical reality. This arrangement was always temporary. My condition adds complications you never agreed to accept." "You haven't answered my question," Adrian pressed. "Is ending our marriage what you want?" Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Sophia struggled to maintain the logical framework she had constructed, the reasoning that led her to offer release despite her heart's contradiction. "What I want," she finally said, "is for you to have the freedom to choose your future without obligation or guilt." Adrian studied her with the focused attention he brought to complex problems, seeing beyond her composed expression to the conflict beneath. "I see." He reached into his jacket, removing a small velvet box and the folded original contract that had bound them together. He placed both on the table beside her dissolution papers. "I had something different in mind for tonight." Sophia stared at the items, understanding dawning slowly. "Our contract specified 3 years," Adrian continued, "but contracts can be renegotiated when circumstances change. When the underlying reality evolves beyond the original parameters." He opened the velvet box, revealing a platinum ring set with a single flawless diamond. Unlike the ostentatious jewelry often associated with wealth, this was elegant in its simplicity, chosen with knowledge of Sophia's preference for clarity over display. "I came tonight prepared to void our original agreement," Adrian said, "and propose a different one. Not time-limited, not condition-bound, not a business arrangement at all." He took the original contract and deliberately tore it in half, then quarters, the sound of ripping paper loud in the quiet room. "I don't want release from our marriage, Sophia. I want it to become real." His voice held emotion he once would have considered a weakness, but now recognized as strength. "I love you, not as a business partner, not as a research collaborator, as the woman who showed me that success without connection is no success at all." Sophia's carefully maintained composure cracked. "Adrian, my condition is part of you, not separate from you," he interrupted gently. "Whatever challenges come, we face them together. That's what these months have taught us, haven't they? That we're stronger together than apart." He pushed aside the dissolution papers and moved around the table to kneel beside her chair. "I'm not proposing because of obligation or the contract or any external factor. I'm proposing because somewhere between arrangement and reality, I fell in love with you, completely, irrevocably." Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks as the walls she had maintained collapsed entirely. "I've been trying to do the right thing, to free you from a burden you never agreed to carry." "You are not a burden," Adrian said firmly, taking her hands in his. "You are essential, to the research, to the company, to me." "I love you too," she whispered, the admission both frightening and freeing. I've been fighting it because it wasn't part of our agreement, because it complicated everything. Some complications are worth embracing. Adrian smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features. The most valuable things in life can't be quantified in contracts. He lifted the ring from its box. This isn't about honoring an agreement anymore. This is about choosing a future together, whatever it holds. Will you marry me, Sophia? Not on paper this time. For real. We're already married, she pointed out, laughter mixing with tears. A technicality, Adrian replied. I'm asking for the marriage behind the certificate, the partnership beyond the paperwork. Sophia nodded, words momentarily beyond her capacity as emotion overwhelmed her scientist's composure. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger beside the platinum band from their first ceremony. No more separate spaces, no more careful boundaries, just us, facing whatever comes together. Later that evening, they sat on their terrace overlooking the city. Sophia's medical file opened between them as they reviewed her latest test results together. The cellular regeneration is exceeding expectations, Adrian noted, studying the numbers. Cardiac function has improved 12% since treatment began. The children in the trial are showing even more dramatic improvements, Sophia added. Emily Walker is playing soccer again. Jason Chen's neurological symptoms have reduced by 60%. She leaned against Adrian's shoulder, no longer maintaining professional distance. The treatment isn't a cure, but it's giving us time, giving them time. Time we'll use well, Adrian promised, his arm around her. Both for the research and for us. The city lights spread before them like possibilities made visible. Where once Adrian had seen only success metrics and market positions, he now recognized potential for impact, for meaning, for the kind of legacy that transcended business valuations. Where Sophia had once seen only research objectives and scientific questions, she now recognized the human connections that gave purpose to her work, including the most unexpected connection of all, to the man beside her. What had begun as a clinical business arrangement had transformed into something neither had sought but both now treasured, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared purpose and love that had grown not despite their careful boundaries, but because the best parts of themselves had gradually, inevitably breached those walls. The Blackwood Foundation headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming building in downtown Manhattan. 5 years after the FDA approval of the KTS treatment protocol, what had begun as a focused research initiative had expanded into a global organization dedicated to funding scientists with personal connections to the diseases they studied. Sophia Blackwood stood at the window of the main conference room, watching researchers and administrators move purposefully through the open workspace. The foundation now supported over 40 research teams across 12 countries, each led by scientists who brought both professional expertise and personal investment to their work. The Singapore team just reported breakthrough results on their neural regeneration study, said Dr. Lin, now the foundation's research director. They're requesting expanded funding for Phase 2 trials. Approved, Adrian replied without hesitation, reviewing the data on his tablet. Allocate whatever resources they need. The Blackwood Foundation operated differently from traditional medical research organizations. Its founding principle, that personal connection to medical challenges could drive innovation rather than compromise objectivity, had revolutionized research funding models worldwide. What had begun with Sophia's KTS research had expanded to include dozens of rare and previously underfunded conditions. The quantum computational approaches Adrian had developed accelerated research timelines across all projects, allowing teams to achieve in months what once took years. Beyond the foundation's walls, Blackwood innovations continued to thrive under Adrian's leadership, though with priorities dramatically different from 5 years earlier. The company's technologies now focused primarily on medical applications, environmental solutions, and accessibility innovations. Measurable impact had replaced pure profit as the core metric of success. As the meeting concluded, Sophia watched Adrian speaking with a young researcher whose sister had the condition he studied. The once isolated CEO now connected easily with others, finding common ground even in brief interactions. Some transformations were visible to anyone who knew them. Others remained private miracles shared between them alone. The annual KTS family conference filled the hotel ballroom with laughter and energy, children running between chairs, parents exchanging stories, researchers sharing updates in approachable language. At the center of it all was 12-year-old Emma Walker, the first child to receive the treatment protocol after FDA approval. Once unable to walk unassisted, she now demonstrated soccer tricks for a circle of admiring younger children, her movements fluid and confident. 5 years ago, we were told Emma might not see her 10th birthday, her mother told the assembled families during the opening session. Today, she's captain of her soccer team and planning to become a doctor. Throughout the room, similar stories repeated with variations. Jason Chen, now 14, displayed his science fair project on genetic medicine. Lily Rodriguez demonstrated her ballet routine. Michael Tanner explained the robot he had programmed. His neurological symptoms had reduced enough to allow fine motor control. Sophia moved through the crowd, greeting families she had come to know personally over the years. These weren't research subjects to her. They were partnerships, each family contributing to the evolution of treatments through their feedback and participation. Dr. Blackwood. Emma spotted her and rushed over, wrapping Sophia in an enthusiastic hug. I got accepted to the science immersion program at Columbia, just like you did when you were young. That's wonderful, Emma, Sophia replied, genuinely delighted. They're lucky to have you. Adrian joined them, carrying plates of food from the buffet. I hear congratulations are in order, Ms. Walker. Emma beamed. Thank you for the recommendation letter, Mr. Blackwood. My teacher said it was very persuasive. I simply stated facts, Adrian replied with a smile. Your research proposal was exceptional. As Emma rejoined her friends, Adrian handed Sophia a plate. 43 children at this year's conference. 43 who might not have been here without your work. Our work, Sophia corrected gently. I couldn't have done this alone. Adrian's gaze moved across the room, taking in the children playing, parents laughing, researchers engaging directly with the families they served. When I built my company, I thought success meant market valuation and quarterly growth. I had no idea what real impact looked like. The Blackwood penthouse had evolved alongside its occupants. What once were separate domains had merged into shared spaces filled with evidence of their intertwined lives. Research journals shared shelves with business texts. Adrian's minimalist aesthetic had softened with personal photographs and mementos. Sophia's practical approach had expanded to include touches of luxury she'd once considered unnecessary. In the home office they now shared, Adrian reviewed the Foundation's annual impact report. The numbers were impressive by any standard. Treatments developed for 14 rare conditions, mortality rates reduced by significant percentages, quality of life improvements measured across thousands of patients. Yet the metrics that once would have satisfied him completely now seemed insufficient to capture what truly mattered. These statistics don't tell the whole story, he noted as Sophia joined him. What's missing? She asked, though she already knew the answer. The immeasurable components, Emma's soccer games, Jason's science experiments, the parents who can plan for their children's futures again. Adrian set down the report. The numbers show what we've done, but not why it matters. This perspective, valuing impact beyond quantifiable metrics, represented Adrian's most profound transformation. The man who had once approached marriage as a business contract now recognized that the most significant aspects of his life couldn't be captured in spreadsheets or annual reports. The board wants to expand the Foundation's focus to include adult-onset neurological conditions, Sophia said, reviewing notes from their latest meeting. What do you think? Adrian asked, genuinely interested in her perspective. I think we have the resources and methodology to make meaningful progress, she replied. And I think of my mother, who never received a proper diagnosis, and how many others might benefit. Adrian nodded, making notes. We'll restructure funding allocations for the next quarter. The quantum processing division can support the additional computational requirements. Their professional collaboration had deepened with time, each bringing complementary strengths to their shared mission. Adrian's business acumen and strategic thinking paired with Sophia's scientific insight and human connection created a leadership approach greater than either could achieve alone. The Singapore team wants you to consult on their neural interface design, Adrian added. Sophia smiled. Only if you'll join me. Your computational architecture improved their last protocol by 40%. What had begun as a contractual partnership had evolved into something rarely found in either business or marriage, true collaboration without ego, shared purpose without sacrifice of individual strengths. Eleanor Blackwood, now 83 but still formidable, hosted Sunday dinner at her Hamptons estate as she had throughout the 5 years of their marriage. Age had done little to diminish her sharp mind or direct manner. The Foundation's new building is impressive, she noted, as they enjoyed coffee on the terrace overlooking the Atlantic, though perhaps a bit ostentatious for researchers. The architectural design actually improves collaborative workflow, Adrian defended mildly, and the environmental systems reduce operating costs by 30%. Eleanor waved this away. I'm teasing you, Adrian. The Foundation is extraordinary. Gerald would have been proud, not of the business success, though that's considerable, but of the purpose behind it. Sophia joined them, carrying a tray of desserts. Adrian tells me you're considering joining the foundation's board of directors. At my age? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. What could I possibly contribute? Perspective, Adrian replied. Wisdom. The ability to see beyond immediate objectives to longer-term impact. Eleanor studied her grandson with satisfaction. 5 years earlier, such sentiment from Adrian would have been unimaginable. The driven, isolated businessman had become a leader who valued wisdom alongside efficiency, human insight alongside data analysis. You've both built something remarkable, Eleanor said, her usual directness softened with genuine pride. Not just the foundation or the company, but your partnership. Those are rare, relationships where both individuals become more rather than less of themselves together. She reached for their hands, one of her few gestures of physical affection. Gerald and I had 52 years, and I thought that was the last great love story in this family. I'm delighted to have been proven wrong. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant orange and gold, Eleanor watched Adrian and Sophia walking along the beach below the terrace, heads bent in conversation, hands naturally finding each other's. What had begun as her grandson's practical solution to a business problem had transformed not only his life, but countless others. Some might call it fate or destiny. Eleanor, practical even in her sentimentality, preferred to see it as the natural outcome when the right people found each other at the right moment and had the courage to recognize what they'd found. That evening, back in their penthouse, Adrian and Sophia stood on their terrace watching the Manhattan skyline transition from sunset to the glittering constellation of city lights. The conference evaluations were unanimously positive, Sophia noted, reviewing feedback on her tablet. Families particularly appreciated the direct interaction with researchers. Next year we should expand the educational programs for the children, Adrian suggested. Many showed interest in medical and scientific careers. Sophia set down her tablet, turning to face him fully. I received my latest test results today. Adrian's attention immediately focused entirely on her, work forgotten. And complete remission, she said, joy breaking through her scientist's composure. The modified protocol has eliminated all detectable markers of disease progression. Adrian pulled her into his arms, the professional distance that had once defined their interaction long forgotten. That's extraordinary. The longitudinal data suggests permanence, she continued, her scientific mind never completely at rest, even in moments of personal significance. The children's results show similar patterns. So Dr. Blackwood has saved herself along with countless others, Adrian said softly, brushing hair from her face with gentle fingers. We saved each other, Sophia corrected, leaning into his touch. In more ways than one. Their journey from business arrangement to genuine partnership contained no single moment of transformation but countless small choices to trust, to risk vulnerability, to see beyond facades to the person beneath. What began as a contract had become a connection neither had sought but both now recognized as the foundation of everything meaningful they had built. As city lights reflected in the windows around them, Adrian and Sophia stood together at the intersection of all they had been and all they might yet become, two brilliant minds who had discovered that the most complex and rewarding challenge wasn't building businesses or developing treatments, but opening themselves to the possibility of connection that transcended all calculation. If you've enjoyed Adrian and Sophia's journey from business arrangement to true love, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Ross Story Trail. Your support helps us continue bringing these meaningful stories to life. Comment below with your thoughts or similar experiences of unexpected connections that transformed your life. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story of transformation and discovery. Until next time, remember that the most valuable contracts are the ones written not on paper, but in the heart.